Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease. I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute for medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started. Hello, everyone. I am so happy that you came back and wanted to hear more about how I made strides towards healing my gut. So in the first part of this quote unquote series, I talked about experimenting with a GAPS diet and really trying to understand the best ways that I could really get my gut health back together. Now, remember in the episode 29 about Hello IBS, I talked in detail about some of the issues that I ran into as a result of having a lot of problems related to my gut. So in this episode, what I would really like to do is just talk to you and give you an overview of specifically the 6-week process that I took in terms of figuring out what my body really liked. And then to provide you with a sample of that in the show notes and kind of talk through how I really just managed that entire process. First things first is I really was determined to get better. Now, before I spoke about how I was vegetarian for 9 months, and it was great, but I didn't really have a true understanding as to why that was great. So naturally, what I wanted to do was once my mom introduced me to the GAPS diet, I really took it seriously because it was very important to me to stop feeling bad. And I'm so happy I did it. So here was the initial part of it. The first part, I spent a lot of time just trying to understand what gut health meant, what probiotics were, why food was important in terms of making sure you weren't eating foods that would trigger inflammation or cause a leaky gut, and just understanding all of these terms that I kept hearing. So here's the first part of all of that. When it comes to gut health, a lot of people talk about why it's so important, but really, you kind of want to understand what that means. So as a summary, what I took from understanding what was quote unquote a good gut, it basically, and what I'm summarizing this to be, and you can have a very different definition and that's totally okay, is that when you have a healthy gut, it basically means that you have a healthy balance of bacteria in your digestive system. So if I, for example, have IBS, I might have a lower level of bacteria that protects against inflammation. And there are a plethora of classifications of different bacteria. There are a lot of different strains, so I can't necessarily speak to the exact strain that everyone should have. That's something I definitely think that you should talk to your GI doctor about because they can really help you understand what's going to be beneficial for you. However, one of the other things that I realized was very important was understanding what leaky gut meant as well. And basically, when you have a leaky gut, or the technical quote unquote term is intestinal permeability, that basically means that you have bacteria or toxins that you ingest, whether it's through food or anything else, that basically leak through your intestinal wall of sorts. So in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily considered as a quote unquote real condition or issue, but let's just talk about your digestive system for just a minute, because that's very important. And that's something that I had to do a lot of research on and break it down in a way that I could understand it. So essentially, your gut is responsible for protecting you from a lot of the junk that we encounter on a daily basis. So when you think about your intestines, think about them as a barricade or the guards that stand outside of a building to protect your inner It's a plane going by. So when you think about the gut when you think about your intestinal wall, that is basically like the guard that stands outside of your building, or think about it as a bouncer in a club. That person is usually very strong, and they're very, very protective of, are you an intruder? Are you coming in to have a good time, or are you about to wreak havoc? And they basically determine what's going to enter into your body via your bloodstream. And it also controls, as a result of what's coming into your bloodstream, what's essentially going to get to your other organs. So when you think about that, first off, once I really processed that that's what was really going on, I was like, oh yeah, I need to make sure I have the strongest bouncer outside of my club called my body, because it is important and there is a lot going on in here, and I need to make sure that we're good. Now, in your intestines, they are tightly bound together by what are called tight junctions. So if you've ever played with those blocks, and the foam blocks that the kids have on the floor in kindergarten and preschool, and they really literally piece them together, that is what you can think about when you think of the tight junction. So it's literally or a puzzle piece. Once you put the pieces together, they fit well. If, let's say, you've had a lot of processed foods and gluten and fried foods and junk and all of these things, over time, they're basically going to attack your intestinal wall. So once you start eating these things, those are going to cause that permeability, or essentially it's going to loosen up those tight junctions, because there's just so much inflammation entering your body as a result of the food that you eat. And once that happens, that bacteria and those toxins are going to enter in your bloodstream. And next thing you know, a fight has broken out and your body is just like, oh no, what's going on in here? Not in my house. We're done. So in comes the inflammatory response, so to speak, to try to figure out, how am I going to repair my body and how am I going to get it back to normal and get rid of the intruders? What I want you to remember is leaky gut is not technically considered a medical condition. And it's something that researchers and doctors are constantly trying to figure out, what causes this permeability, or what proteins or what things are in the body that regulates all of these processes. So it's a lot to be figured out. However, I know there are a lot of things that we can and can't have that will impact our body's ability to process certain foods. So that's the background that I really needed to get a hold of, because everyone's always like, you shouldn't eat gluten, you shouldn't eat fried food, you shouldn't eat excessive sugar, you shouldn't. But in my head, I'm like, well, why? Why can't you tell me what I can and can't have? Like, why is it bad? So that is why I started going down this path of just trying to understand the basics of what leaky gut was and how food was related to whether or not I felt good or I felt bad. This was why I was so open to trying something different and something new, because at that point, I was tired of feeling bad. I was completely and totally over it. I was done. So this is why I was so ready to just dive right in. And here's what I did. 6 weeks, I literally tried my very hardest to build my gut flora back up again. The first week, we literally went to the market and we got bones, knee bones, soup bones, just everything. And I even went to the butcher as well to get as much that they had, because I knew that I was going to make a big batch of it, and that was really important to me. So we spent an entire afternoon making bone broth. It was very, very long. And I'm really glad that I have a pressure cooker now, because that makes this process so much easier. What I did was, after I made all the bone broth, I separated everything out so that I could have large containers and small containers. And of course, I froze some. In that first week, all I did was consume bone broth. It made me so happy. And the reason why I was so elated by this was because I wasn't nauseous. I had been taking so much anti-nausea medication. I had to get intramuscular shots because sometimes I couldn't even keep water down. And it was so relieving to actually be able to consume something and it actually stay in my stomach. That was my first aha moment. What I did the next week was I said, okay, bone broth, it's great, it's cool. How about I add some vegetables to it? Because me and vegetables were cool. So I added carrots. I really like carrots, by the way. I can eat them all day. They're amazing. Whether they're raw or steamed or pureed, they're delicious. But I digress. Anyhow, the next week, I had carrots in my bone broth. So this is week 2. Week 3, I started adding more vegetables. So I added spinach, I added potatoes, celery, and onions. I was a little afraid of garlic because occasionally that gave me a lot of gas. So I held off on the garlic. That was week 3. So bone broth plus a small mixture of vegetables. Week 4, I was really excited. I was like, okay, I love rice a lot. So I decided to make some white rice. Why not? That did not go well. Not even a little bit. Nope. Fortunately, I cooked the rice on the side, so I was able to offer up my white rice to the rest of my family because my stomach said no. So I gave myself about 2 days. I went back to my broth with just the vegetables, and then I said, well, why not try brown rice? So I tried brown rice. That was good. So I kept up with that, although I really don't like how long it takes to cook brown rice. And then I discovered the Trader Joe's brand of brown rice that you can either put in the microwave or cook it on the stove. Complete and total time saver. I love it. It doesn't give you that weird taste. And the Whole Foods frozen brown rice is also delicious. Two brands that I really enjoy. That was a win. Now I'm going into week 5. In that week, I introduced fish into that whole bone broth exchange. And I was also trying to eat salads and lots of quote unquote live food. So lots of fruits and vegetables. I erred on the side of caution when it came to the foods that you should quote unquote avoid when you have a thyroid disease. Some of which basically include naturally processed foods and frozen foods of sorts. You want to be very careful with the amount of fiber that you consume. All of your fatty foods, just stay away. We know about gluten and bread and pastas and all that stuff, but the fun part was broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower, which I absolutely positively love raw, but they don't love me back. They give me horrible gas, but at the same time, it's also something that you're told to quote unquote avoid. A lot of things that I've read state that if you cook them, you're normally okay. But if you have an iodine deficiency, that can also cause issues with consuming those foods as well. So it's a lot of research going back and forth about those types of foods. And naturally, the last thing is soy. I personally avoid soy particularly because I don't really like it. So that one wasn't all that hard for me. I was very happy at the ability to be able to start consuming more vegetables, keeping my bone broth as well as my fish. I was super happy and super excited. And not only did my gut start to feel better, but my skin was glowing. Okay, it was beautiful. My hair was starting to grow like crazy because it had fallen out a lot and it was thin and brittle, and my nails were strong, and I was feeling myself, guys. Like I was completely and totally into myself. I am not going to lie. But the other thing that I started doing was I started taking probiotics during this time as well. And that was a lot the first day because I was eating a lot of bone broth and vegetables and all that fun stuff. So I was trying to add more fiber in my diet, but also I really wasn't expecting the amount of gas that I had. But then naturally, going to the bathroom and eliminating was a lot easier. And I said, okay, I can rock with this. This is cool. I can actually look and say, all right, I recognize what that is. I'm not, I mean, it's poop. So naturally you're like, ew, but it's important to pay attention to those things. And I'm really sorry if you were eating when I just said that. I apologize. During this time, I also started taking probiotics. So I initially started with Ultimate Flora, and I also took the Garden of Life probiotics, both of which I went to the refrigerated section to obtain those. So I was really, really feeling good during this time. Into week 5, I decided to start adding chicken and turkey to my diet, which that was fine. I noticed a little bit of slight indigestion, but I kept my portions very small initially. Now, into my 6th week, at this point, I could have fish, I could have chicken, turkey, And what was left for me to test out was pork and red meat. Well, that wasn't very hard to eliminate. So pork, no, that did not work at all. Not even a little bit. So pork and I don't get along. And red meat and I don't really get along that much either. But during the times where I am going to start my menstrual cycle, that's honestly the only time I crave it. So in any given month, I will literally have red meat maybe between 2 and 4 times that month, depending on what I'm doing and how I'm feeling. Otherwise, I naturally gravitate towards vegetables with a side of protein occasionally. So those were the biggest things that I did in terms of really understanding what whole foods I could have. Now, I also started taking supplements during this time because I was dangerously deficient in vitamin D. So I had to take a 20,000 unit supplement for about 6 months, actually. I was very low in vitamin B. My iron levels were very low, and I also had a slight iodine deficiency. So it was really important to me to find as many foods that were rich in these vitamins and nutrients as possible, so that once that 6-month period was over, all I had to do was take a 2,000 unit vitamin D tablet, and I really don't have to take any other supplements. But every year when I go to the doctor, I always ask for a full blood workup so that I can understand everything that's going on. And in a future episode, I'll talk about those different blood panels that I normally request, because now, 10 years later, I'm actually able to tell when I'm feeling run down and what I'm deficient in. And I'm normally very good at eating the foods that I know will make me feel better, which that took a really long time. So I'm not even going to stand here and say I got it on the first try, because I'd be lying to you. I definitely did not. It takes time. It takes understanding your cravings, understanding how to properly navigate which foods you can and can't have, because it's very individualized. What works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So it was a learning curve for sure. But with all of this, I recorded everything. I wrote everything down. I documented the symptoms that I had when I didn't feel well. I was always checking in my patient portal and documenting anything that was like, whoa, no, I definitely cannot have this. So basically, after talking through all of that, where did I stand? What could I have and what couldn't I have? So I will basically go to what I could not have, because that list is a lot shorter than what I can have. So for me, I don't eat a pork really at all. I don't eat a lot of red meat. Processed foods, meaning fried foods, any type of fast food, gluten, pastas, no. I do not eat those at all. I don't eat almonds anymore. They give me gas and cramps. And soy. I don't eat a lot of soybeans. Occasionally, I'm okay if I eat edamame beans, but I have to eat protein after. But other than that, I'm pretty much okay. I also don't drink a lot of pop or soda and very sugary, sweet snacks and cakes and all that fun stuff. I'll bake occasionally, but whatever the recipe calls for, I normally take out 3/4 of the amount of sugar that's in it. So I'm always modifying my recipes to remove if it has a lot of gluten in it or if it has a lot of sugar in it. I just take that out and I don't miss it at all. So that's the list of things that I can't have. But for the most part, I can have basically everything else. I don't restrict myself. I'm not super strict about being on this diet or paleo or keto or anything like that, because for me personally, those diets don't make me feel good. So I know for myself personally that doesn't work. But then again, I've also had a very long time to sort through what works for me. So if you're in doubt, talk to a dietitian, talk to a nutritionist, and talk to your primary care and or endocrinologist to formulate a plan on how you're going to understand how to eliminate and add in the foods, the nutrients, and the supplements that you need. And lastly, this became a very fun process for me at the end of it. So as my friend Jennifer Phillips said, I was in my curiosity phase. So I started having fun at this point because I could modify recipes and figure out fun and exciting ways to jazz up my food and make it taste good and not be so bland. I got into having potted herbs and really understanding flavor, not from a let me go to the seasoning salt aisle and just pick up whatever's there. I really learned how to blend my food together in a way that gave me all the nutrients I needed, but I also worked really hard to make it taste good. So that part is fun. And that's a big reason why I love to cook, because I love that fusion of things. I love the fusion of flavors, and everything within the spectrum of cooking, I'm going to try it at least once. So I encourage you to be curious. I encourage you to experiment, but I also encourage you to be safe. That's most important. And I never recommend yo-yo dieting or anything like that. I really think that it's worthwhile to truly figure out what works for you and what doesn't, and be patient about it. It's not an overnight process, but I believe in you and I know that you can do it. This is one of the things that I feel very strongly about in terms of food as medicine. And I absolutely, positively, with everything that I believe in, know that we can definitely resolve a lot of the internal issues in our bodies just by making small dietary changes. So I'm really hopeful for you guys. And again, I really believe in you and I know that you can do it. And this is actually one of the things that I talk about in my course about fighting inflammation, and that's through eating whole and nutritious foods. So with that, friends, I really hope that you have a fantastic day. I hope that you stay well and really think about trying different ways to feel better through food. So I will include some things in the show notes and some of my favorite products and supplements. And I'm currently actually in the process of experimenting with some supplements and with some probiotics. So once I've gone through that trial period, I'll definitely share that with you guys. But that's it for me for now. Again, if you haven't already signed up for my course, it's called the Thyroid Basics Mini Course. The link to that is bit.ly.com/Thyroid Basics Course. And with that, friends, I will talk to you next week. Take care. Okay, Thyroid Warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, be great. Reflect on your triumphs, and as always, be well. Take care.